Well, welcome to the first spring cohort meeting for the application cohort group. If you're here, you are interested in finding out what your next steps are. We're getting ready for application possibly this summer. I always say possibly because when we start to do this process, when we start to work together, what you discover or find is that you are more inclined to be like, maybe I'm not as ready as I thought I was, or, oh, I'm as ready as I would hope to be. So this is a very fluid process. It's not meant to be specific in that way. I do want you all to chime in and ask questions. You can do that through the chat, or you can do that verbally. You can raise your hand. We can do lots of different things today, but we're going to have quite a bit of opportunity to kind of play around. All right, so I have a question for you. Thumbs up, or if you answer yes to any of the following questions. You know when you're going to study. You have a plan in place, or you have an idea of when you're going to study. Okay. What you're going to study. Okay. And have taken a practice exam. Okay. So hang on one second. I want to get a better view of everybody. Thumbs down if you haven't taken a practice exam yet. Okay, so Jack, Eric. Okay. And Zara. Okay. All right. So I am going to do this. We're going to play a little game of breakout. What I would like to do is those of you who answered yes to taking a practice exam, I'm going to group you with someone who hasn't. And I'm going to let them ask you questions about what it was like to take a practice exam. What did you use? And it's okay if you're not like the same, like dental versus med, it's okay. Just talk about that experience with each other about that. So give me 1 second to create a breakout room and we'll go from there. It's going to be easier to stop sharing. Okay, well, we're going to move on then. Share screen. All right, so today's agenda, this is what we're going to do. We are going to go back over our overview. We're going to use it as our plan. And then we're going to talk a little bit about something that you may not have thought of that will probably come up in some case. It's called the Casper test. And there are a couple of other what we call situational judgment tests that you kind of need to have in your mindset, in your sights. We're also going to start getting those experiences into categories. And so we'll kind of do some things with that. And then I'm going to open the floor to any type of question that you might have. And then we have so many cool things happening this spring that I'm really excited to share with you as a group. So that's kind of our game. So we're just continuing this journey towards getting ready to apply. And so you may have remembered in the fall, we were talking about entrance exams. And I just wanted to give you a reminder, we do have the resource library available. I am in the process of purchasing GRE study materials for Magoosh, Princeton Review, and Kaplan. Those are coming from the Future Physicians Club. They agreed to purchase those. We will also have some AAMC bundles that I'm trying to purchase. We get a discount as advisors, and I'm trying to get that. So don't forget, we have the lending library. Typically, I'm in the office from 9 to 3. It is open. We do want to know if you're checking something out, and we do ask that you only check out like a subject for at least a week or two to kind of get your bearings. We also ask you to start identifying your experiences and aligning those. We'll start putting those into categories tonight with a couple of tools that I can give you and continue that process on. I also suggested that you locate your schools. Feel free to set up an advising appointment with me. I'm going to put my You Can Book Me calendar link in the chat. If you want to go over those schools, if you want to take a quick look at them and make sure that you didn't miss anything when you were looking at that information, sometimes it can get really complex. You are more than welcome to do that. I am booked out probably a week and a half, but I mean, we got plenty of time. So you're welcome to set up appointments to kind of look at those things. Hopefully you identified what letters of recommendation you might need or any of those kind of types of things. But now we're moving to spring. We're going to start writing. We're going to do it. We're going to start drafting our experiences into meaningful content. We're going to start drafting a personal statement. We're going to start thinking about who aligns with which letter that you might need, letter recommendation wise. And we're also going to talk about when's the best time to ask. I'll go through that a little bit today. And then we're going to start studying. We're going to come up with a game plan. So in terms of going back real quick on the letters of recommendation, one of the things I want to add to that is most students don't ask faculty until about March. If you're a graduate and you feel like you don't want to lose that momentum with a professor, you can start planting the seed and just mention that you might be asking them. If you're going to ask at all, please don't just do it by email. Please don't just make an ask through email. Don't do that unless you know that person and you see them on a regular basis and they know what your life is about. Don't do that. Do them some courtesy, take an extra step and set up a meeting. Set up some kind of a meeting with them that says, hey, I'd really like to chit chat with you, either if it's in person or via Zoom. It comes across so much better if you make the time for them and they make the time for you to ask them that way than to just jot off an email. I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me where someone has asked me via email and I don't know who they are. That's never a good position for them to be in. Starting to study, some of you might be all in, some of you might be, I'm going to trickle in. In other words, maybe it's like an hour of studying and then it's a week and then it moves to 4. Spring break is a good place because you hopefully are in a good place with school. You have an idea of what's going on with grades and classes, and you can see what your time can dedicate towards the studying habit. The writing piece, though, can be throughout. And what I would recommend is if you're not already doing any kind of reflection writing right now, you get started doing that. And hopefully what we do tonight will help you with that. And this is all working towards that summer, towards the centralized applications, towards getting to grow and learn and being able to articulate that taking those exams in the summer and completing your secondary interviews. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Casper. It's not a friendly ghost. Okay. Many professional and health programs require this assessment now. It really varies from program to program. There is a list of schools. I'll be sending you guys a handout. I'm also going to put in the chat the actual Casper website, which does have some really great frequently asked questions. They do suggest that you try and register for it if you need it. In other words, you probably need to look at your schools and see your schools and or programs and see if it's an expectation for you that you're going to need to take it. Typically, most students will probably register for it in early spring or mid-spring, and they'll probably take it somewhere between April and July. If you're 100% in, you're going to apply this summer, then I could say the earlier test takers are okay. Just be aware that it is only good for one cycle, and you can only take it one time. So once you do it, it's done. You can't really study for this test. It is it's very situational. We're going to play around with it a little bit. I'm going to have you guys practice doing it. An example of a question. You can watch some of the videos, and there is a full-length kind of practice exam, so you can kind of run through it and at least get an idea. Is assessing you on all of those soft skills, the collaboration, the communication skills, the ethics, empathy, and motivation. For some students, this is a way for you to get past GPA and test scores, right? It's for them to see what your tendencies currently are, how you make decisions. We do a mock MMI, a mock multiple mini interview, and many of the types of questions that are presented in a situational test are going to be kind of attributed in an interview like that, an MMI. And so what we would suggest that you do is that you participate in that this spring. If you can, either watch or be an interviewee. We'll be sending information about that, but that is a way to kind of get some practice, so to speak, in. 12 sections. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes total to complete it. They do give you an optional break. They're mostly video-based and word-based scenarios. And then you have some questions you have to answer. The nice thing is they're not going to judge you on your spelling. You're allowed to respond in full sentences or bullet points. But the key is that you need to make sure that you're being true to yourself and you're answering in a way that expresses who you are. Like I said, I would say if you're 100% in and you have some time and you want to try and take it in late April, May, or June, I think that's fine. I do think that a lot of students will wait, evaluate their schools, and maybe take it in July, only because by then they hopefully have some responses back. But there is a list of tools. And again, every time we do these cohort meetings, I record. I also send you the slides so that you can click on the links and try out some of those things. There are other situational tests, judgment tests. The AAMC is formulating one right now. And so there are some schools that are using that as test run. The idea behind it was the AAMC wanted to create their own and have that set. Casper's been around a little bit longer and been a little bit more focused and useful in that one. So questions about the situational test?
Can we sign up for Casper just through AMCAS? Got to do it and then have
the
them
Casper
like
site. Yep.
Okay.
The Casper site. Yep.
Cool.
You can't do it separate. It's separate.
You were saying that you could wait to take it in July, so you would already have sent out your primary applications and you can still wait. That doesn't need to be part of that.
Yeah, because sometimes it's attached not to your primary. Most of the times it's not attached to your primary.
Okay.
It's more focused on your secondaries. So there are kind of two types of schools out there, whether you're thinking about PA schools or you're thinking about dental schools or medical schools. There are schools that are going to screen you. They're going to look at your stats. They're going to look at your GPA. They're going to look at your test scores. And then they're going to invite you to fill out another application. And here's the cool part. The schools that are Casper related are actually going to save their process in their application process on their website. So the key is go out to their application process and read through the step-by-step. When you're looking at the school, make sure you understand, okay, they're going to expect a primary application from me. Then they're going to expect a secondary application from me, whether I'm applying to graduate school or I'm applying for their program, and they have other essays that are attached to those things. And so, yes, some of our students will opt to take the test later, especially if like maybe only 2 of their schools require the Casper and they're kind of waiting to hear back if they're going to be in that loop to have to do it. I do know I've had students take it a little bit later. I would not recommend that. I would say be prepared for it and go do it. Just be aware that it's only good for one cycle. So you have to do it again if you were in another cycle. That's just the nature of it. You can't hold out like the other entrance exams and wait. And more schools are opting to choose this. And I think it gives them another way to look at you. So one of my students bombed it, he said, but he still got interviews. And some students, they rock it and they don't get interviews at all. So there isn't a real rhyme or method to this. It's just that it's testing you on who you are, right? So you present your best self and be as prepared as you possibly can by knowing kind of what they're looking for in terms of, there isn't a right or wrong answer. It's how do you stick to your guns when you answer? Does that make sense? Other questions? Good job, guys. These are great questions. Okay, we're gonna try. We're gonna play. All right. So I'm gonna put you guys in breakouts. I think I'm gonna do it this way. I think I'm gonna put 3 in a room. So I think I'll do 4 rooms. And then let's see, let's put let's put Courtney, Elsie, and Grafton. Well, heck, that worked out pretty well. Okay. So before I open them, so you are going into this breakout room and each of you is going to take, let's do 2 minutes. So there's 3 of you in a room. So each of you gets to respond for 2 minutes. So we'll be in the room for about 6. So you're going to briefly describe a situation that you had to make a sacrifice. Okay. You are going to answer the following questions. Do you regret your decision? Why or why not? And did you learn anything from this situation that can be applied to your desired career? Finally, explaining your response. So you have 2 minutes to describe a situation that you made a sacrifice, whether you regretted it or not, and why, and what did you learn, and how do you apply it? Okay. So I'm going to open the rooms and I'm going to give you 6 minutes. So it'll be 5:32 that I'll bring you back. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. How did that feel? Good, bad, ugly? Where were we? It was good?
I think it was kind of difficult at first to think of a story. So I feel like I need to have more stories in the back of my head.
That's why so we will have 2 things happening this spring that could be hugely beneficial for Casper. Number 1, we'll be doing an interview preparation workshop. It's hosted by the Future Physicians Club, the College Health Science Advising Office, and the Career Services Office, where we'll talk about how do you prepare? How do you find and locate some of those stories or examples that might fit some of those things that are going to be unique to you? Some of the video-based situations are going to be, you're watching a situation go down and you have to decide how you'd respond if you were in position A or position B, depending on how they place you in that scenario. The MMI is the other great place for you to practice because we do that. That's what we try and do, is find you situations where we're not trying to trip you up, but we're trying to give you that feeling of, okay, this is what it's like to respond in this way. Put you in those kinds of situations. So I'd strongly recommend in the month of March that you participate in some of those things. Cool. Anybody else want to comment, put something out there? Can't study for it, but you can practice and prepare. Okay. All right. Okay. So building our community. We always trying to build a little community, and we've been doing that throughout tonight's presentation. But what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about brainstorming categories of your experience. There is stuff out there in the World Wide Web. If somebody Googles right now, they probably could come up with some that are legit things that would be experiences that would be on their application. Whether they're applying to PA school, whether they're applying to medical school, whether you're applying to dental school, or whether you're applying to PT school, doesn't matter. let's brainstorm. Tell me what you think is going to be a category or a thing you might need to have an experience in. I'll give you an
Doesn't DAT have like dexterity or like a
There.
way that you help your fingers?
Good job. The ASDAS, the application service, does expect dental students to identify dexterity experience. So knitting or fly tying or anything like that. Awesome, Courtney. Yes, yes. What else? Come on. What do you think?
Leadership.
Leadership, yes. Places that you led, right? They might call it mentorship or leadership experience or teaching experience, right? Somewhere where you taught another person. Great. What else? I'm not making this list tonight, folks. You got to do it. Come on.
I think the big one is hands-on patient care.
Patient exposure, right? So it might be hands-on or it might be healthcare interaction, right? So PA schools, they differentiate between what is healthcare experience, where you might be interacting in the healthcare environment, and what is hands-on, I'm interacting one-on-one with a patient, right? So there are some ways to differentiate that, absolutely. Patient exposure being one of them. You might also see on an application an example of a category of work-related healthcare experience and volunteer healthcare experience, right? What else? Good job, Eric. Yes. That's it.
Something that shows you're collaborative too, like how you work with others or that you have experience with that, maybe.
Okay. You certainly will have an experience that might relate to that. But when it comes down to it, you're going to go into the application process and there'll be a little spot for work/activities. And there'll be these categories that you will need to identify, and you get to kind of market yourself. So some of our students have grappled with, okay, I have volunteer experience with patients, but I also have work experience with patients. How do I classify that, right? Because some of the applications don't differentiate between volunteer. They say they want to see your volunteer and community service, but they don't want to say it doesn't have to be patient related, right? So you kind of get to decide how you want to market yourself. And I just gave you all a hit. So if somebody wants to jump on that bandwagon, I just said one.
Community volunteering.
Yes, volunteer service where you are not getting paid. All of these professions are service focused. They want to see, they want to know where you've given of yourself without getting a paycheck. Okay, does not have to be medically related. There might be a place on the application to indicate this is volunteer patient exposure, but it doesn't have to be volunteer related only to that. If you got my newsletter last week, I put Girls on the Run on there and Big Brothers, Big Sisters and Boys Club. And I tried to give you a little bit more variety than just the medical ones. I know you want those ones, but you guys need to think outside the box a little. So volunteerism absolutely is going to be on there. Leadership is absolutely going to be on there. Patient exposure is going to be on there in different frameworks. What else? That's it.
I saw a list that this girl made one time of her experience doing applications, and she said that like the things that were noted were like research experience, medically related, community service, leadership, and then extracurriculars.
Yes,
Were the five
research,
noted.
if you have it or not. So here's the cool part. Just because you don't have it doesn't mean that you're not going to get accepted medical school or PA school or whatever it is, but it's a place. It's a option on the application for you to list that, right? The same goes for extracurricular activities. I don't know how many times I've asked you all what you like to do for fun. There's a reason, okay? If you do something for fun on a regular basis, it speaks to who you are. Now, here's the example of what not to do. So a student asked me, can I put camping on my application? I said, well, when's the last time you went camping? 4 years ago. No, you can't put it on there. It doesn't speak to who you are because you haven't done it in 4 years. You'd like to do it, but you haven't. Versus someone who said, I'd like to put camping and kayaking on my application. How long have you done it? And when's the last time you did? Oh, I go every weekend. Oh, and then I discovered that that person had a leadership role, was a guide as a kayaker, taught kayaking lessons. It was like, well, gosh, this should go on the application. Absolutely, it belongs. Okay, so we've talked about extracurricular activities. We've talked about volunteer and community service. We've talked about leadership. We've talked about research, and we talked about patient exposure. There's one more. Here's a big one.
Shadowing.
They call it shadowing. We call it observation, right? Observation. Okay. So in most cases, a medical school application will have 15 spots for 15 activities. Okay. PA application will have unlimited. Okay. But you kind of want to shoot for 15, right? Dental will have unlimited. Optometry has 15. There's a couple others, and we'll go through that in February. We'll go through a little bit more detail. And you'll have a thing, you'll have to kind of have a category aligned. And so this is where it's okay to have a list of things, right? I did this on these dates with this supervisor, and this is how I would probably market it. Okay. You're going to have a place where you're going to have characters, and we're going to work on that in February, but you're going to have characters to write. Okay. So what I want you guys to do, and we're going to go through this, is I want you to focus on not only getting the details, but also getting a reflection process in place. So you need to know what it is. Who supervised you? When was it? What was the category you think it belongs in? And you can get this information by going out to the application that you're applying with, right? So centralized application service is going to give you a list of the options you have, okay? And yes, you should write out the details of what you saw. What was it? What did you do? Okay. Then you should be like, well, so what? Why should I care about this thing that I did? Why should anybody else care? Why should a medical school care? I think this is the hardest question for you all to answer because you're freaking out. You're like, I don't want to tell them I'm a kayaker. I don't want to tell them I work as a barista my entire life. Well, shame on you, you should. Those are skills and abilities and knowledge that you need. What did it mean for you? I want you to really think about that thing. Don't just list it out and describe it. Ask yourself, why is this thing sticking in my mind and why is it important? Okay. This is English 101 at its best, guys. It's reflective writing. What was it? Why should I care about it? And now what? What am I going to do with this information? Am I going to tell a medical school that I learned this and it's going to apply to my goals of being a physician? Is it going to did it drive you? Maybe it's an experience you did 4 years ago and you haven't done it since, but it enlightened you to make another choice. I did a little bit of research on a VIP program and then I applied for the Ralph Jones. Those are examples of how it springboarded into something else. Or I really hated that volunteer experience, so I went looking for another one, right? Show how you've grown. So you're going to get 700 characters with spaces roughly, depends on the program, some are 600. where you get to describe and reflect about that experience. Okay, so if you do this first, if you get the description giggles out and you describe exactly what happened, and then you go back and you look at it from another lens, you reflect about that thing that you did and you ask yourself why it's important to you or why you did it. It can be superficial or it can grow into something beautiful. And now what are you going to do with that information? Okay. What I want you to do is don't be afraid to throw everything on the table, every little thing you've done, and then make some hierarchy decisions. Where did you gain your most insight on one thing about yourself? Where did you grow the most? So that you can bring things into those categories and find at least 15 experiences. And then we can work through February on writing those. Here's been my experience. Students that do this, students that make an extreme effort to be intentional about writing what they've done and gaining those categories and understanding, often are able to pick 3 of their most meaningful. Allopathic medical schools will let you pick 3, and then you get to expand even further. About 1325 characters with spaces. Characters, folks, not words, characters, not very much. Okay, but if you can find the 3 most impactful experiences that you've done so far, okay, you can then do one of 2 things. One, you can either go off on a complete tangent and write a personal statement that has no relevance to your experiences whatsoever, or you can use those experiences, right? You can focus on those 3 experiences and writing them in a way that you get to be more detailed and it describes exactly who you are. So this is material that you could have at your disposal to write personal statements and also write your experiences. It's my experience with writing personal statements and these experiences out that you want them to be like a circular motion. What happens on the right side affects the left, and what happens on the left affects the right. In other words, what if your schools choose to read your experiences first before they read your personal statement? They have that option. Is your experiences going to enlighten your personal statement and want them to read it? And vice versa. Okay, so do the ground laying work now. Do the writing now. Answer the questions for each of the experiences. It will benefit you in lots of different ways. Okay, so I'm going to send something to you in an email. Okay. Oops. I'm going to send something to you in chat. And then I'm going to share it on my screen. And I missed the chats, but yes, organizational skills, knitting, hobbies, critical thinking, those are all good. This is a wayfinding map. And so I am going to stop my share and just share my screen. You can print this and write it by hand. It's probably going to be the easiest way for you to do it. It lends better to an 11 by 17, or you can print it on an 11 by 12, or you can make it up yourself. So you could sit down one day, get a big piece of paper and make it in half. The top half are your positive, cool experiences that, wow, they were great. And the bottom half are your negative experiences. Now, we all have negative experiences. We all have struggles. We all have failures. We all have those things. And there is a way to address those in your application with a positive light. But they are who you are and they have informed you. So you could just take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle and know that your pluses are on the top and your minuses are on the bottom. Leave room for 5 boxes of insight. So like you could draw this picture up yourself, okay? I want you to think about your last 5 years. Some of you may have taken my advice last fall and started writing going backwards, right? Once a week, 2 times, 2 weeks behind, 3 weeks, a month, and some of you may not have done that at all. This is a quick way for you to kind of do it. Thinking about that the right-hand side of this piece of paper is your most recent things. Working your way to the left. I know that's counterintuitive, you might think, but that's the idea. Don't go back any further than 5. Don't do that. Now, here's the cool part. Your personal statement can go back further than 5. Absolutely. But for this assignment, for this thing, to keep it simple, go back 5. Okay. So maybe you break it down. If you're one of those crazy people like me, I had a hard time wrapping my head around doing this. And so what I did was I was like, okay, 5 years. Each year has 6 months. I halved it. And I went, okay, what did I do last 6 months? And then what did I do 6 months before that? And you could do bullet points and just do activity, list it. And then you can go in and dig a little deeper and maybe put some of the details in. The key is putting the negative and the positive on the top and the negative on the bottom, going back 5 years. And then, because we're looking at 5 years, I would hope that each year you pulled an insightful thing. Like, I learned that I'm not as good a studier as I thought I was, and I learned how to study better. Or I learned that I'm not good with kids, but I'm great with adults. Or I learned that I can learn new things, right? You can use lots of different questions. The key to this is making sure that first you set yourself an intention. How many of you have ever done intention setting before? You need 10 minutes, 10 minutes of quiet where nothing is going on. And you sit down and you say, okay, what are my goals for today and my future? And ask yourself, what intention do you have of getting to that goal? Not the negative stuff. It's the, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this one step forward to do that. Then you need to ask yourself, okay, if your intention is to become a physician, and you're going to do that by taking the step of analyzing your experiences, what point of view do you have that has led you here? Think about your life. Why have you chosen a field that requires service? And then think about the worldview. Like, what is your worldview? And it could be spiritual, or it could be lots of different things, okay? If any of you have read Design Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, this is where it comes from. And that's what the little image, the little icon is. It's from the Design Your Life studio at Stanford. This was a very powerful tool for me as a human being. And I think it's great for someone who's getting ready to apply, because you can map it all out. It's a wayfinding map. It's how you found your way here. And it's a retrospect look behind you about what you did, pulling insights into that process. So I strongly recommend that you do this before we meet up again in February. This is a great tool for doing it, and we will help you do some writing. We will absolutely help you do some writing. Here's the cool part. So I'm going to share again. So it'll make sense in a second. And we're not going to have time to do it today, but I want to answer some questions in the last 5 minutes, and then I'll deliver for you what the spring semester is going to look like, what our plan is. I like a plan. Plans are good. Okay. So I threw one out here, kind of like a, you always bait the tip jar, right? You always put a $5 in the tip jar so that people will actually put more money in the tip jar. That's the kind of idea with this. I just threw this one out here. What should I do about observation? Everyone keeps telling me no. Okay. But I want you to ask questions. Throw them out there. We got 5 minutes. Go. Questions.
If we do research in a class, do we get to count that as part, like not a VIP research, but like just separate research, a part of a class? Do we get to count that?
You learned something?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're applying to schools that have an expectation that you gained research knowledge and you can express that in your activity, you probably need to identify that it was a course and not
Okay.
think of it as how it counts, but think about what you learned by doing it. Do you understand the process of doing research and did you gain knowledge in doing so?
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Let's go. That was a great question. Come on, I know you got them. I'm not scary, I promise.
I guess another question. Since I'm graduating this summer, but I won't be applying for med school until the summer after. I know you kind of touched on this already about about recommendation letters. Do I kind of before I graduate, kind of put the seed in, just be like, hey, look, I'd like to, eventually touch base with you again and see if you'd be willing to write a recommendation letter for me, and then kind of follow through with that as kind of the months go on, just periodically.
I think if the point is that you're asking for a letter of recommendation from someone who has given you a relationship.
Okay.
So you want to continue the relationship.
Right.
Yes. You want to plant the seed and you want to, what I would say is I would spin it like this. I would want to share with them that you have intentions of applying to medical school.
Okay.
And that you want to gain some experience. And so you're going to graduate and then you're going to apply, but you have valued the time with them and you don't want to lose that. And they may be able to provide you with some cool opportunities that you get to play with while you're taking the time off you need.
Right.
Okay. So yes, you plant the seed in a healthy way. You continue the relationship. I always tell students, I'm like, why wouldn't you reach out to them and be like, hey, I just wanted to let you know what's going on. It was really exciting. You can even ask them, well, have you done any cool research that I might be able to read about? Have you been published in anything that I could, I really enjoyed your class if it was a faculty member. So yes, you plant the seed, you keep the relationship rolling.
Okay, perfect.
Great. What else? We had a research question.
I have a question that I guess I would pose to you as well as the group regarding research opportunities. I'm trying to develop something for this coming year, and finding a place to start, VIP versus like getting a tech job in somebody's lab versus, approaching different professors you're comfortable with, like where people have had success and failures in those directions.
Cool. Well, I'm going to give a plug. If you are taking coursework in the fall, any of you who are pre-med who are taking coursework in the fall, you can apply for the Ralph Jones Summer Fellowship. It's a 10-week full-length, full stipend paid fellowship with either a biology or chemistry or physics professor. We'll have the applications out. I'll be sending it to the pre-med students. It is only a pre-med one. But it is available for someone who is going to be in school in the fall. So it can't be for someone who's graduating this spring and wouldn't be taking any coursework in the fall, because it's a student employee position. But we'll have those applications out in the next week and they will be due by February 28th. We will make our selection in mid-March and then we will place students if they need that support. So that is one way to do it if you're a pre-med. Other people in the room, suggestions? How did they get started on research if you've done it?
I just emailed some professors that I knew did research and I asked if I could meet them to talk to them and learn more about their research. And then when it sounded interesting, I just asked if they had an extra spot in their lab. Someone.
Thank you, Courtney. Anybody else?
I went the VIP route. So I took VIP 200 last semester and am doing it in Lisa Warner's lab and kind of got just kind of baseline knowledge from VIP 200, and I was able to decide how many hours I had to dedicate to the lab and like when I wanted to go in and kind of rule my own schedule. And then this semester I'm doing VIP 400, so I'm going in like a lot more often, and that's kind of nice too, based on like what you're looking for, how much experience you want in research, I guess. But
it doesn't have to be benchmark research. It doesn't have to be biology or chemistry or physics, but I know that's attractive, but there's also the centers. There's lots of centers for like Centers for Health Policy. There's a center in the psychology department. Any research conducted where you have a hypothetical question and you get to analyze some data, that's huge. I do know that our Center for Health Policy might be looking. We gave them some names of some sophomores because they do like to train somebody who will stick around for a little bit. So that may not be the place, but it is a cool opportunity to do some research that way. So just don't keep in mind, it doesn't have to be centered around just biology, chemistry, and physics research. It can be broader than that.
I would say too, my PI really likes to, if you're very interested and persistent. So she's just accepted somebody into our lab, her lab, into her lab that just was very persistent. They emailed her, I think called her, emailed her again, and then she said, well, if you want to, you can show up and see what we do in our lab meeting. And they showed up in the lab meeting and she said, well, since you're here today, that shows you really want to be here. So you're in. So I think it's going to vary from PI to PI, you know, that the head of that lab. But I know for her, that's important. And I know for some of the others, that's important too. So if you find something that you're interested in, you know, you Google that person, you're like, oh, I really love what they do. Then you put that into your sort of, if you're just sort of cold emailing them, you put that in there like, oh, I read this research of yours. I'm really interested in this. I'd love to, you know, talk about maybe helping out in your lab or something like that. And then following up, at least that was what was important because she didn't know this person either at first. And then another one was in her classes and did well and was engaged in her classes. So I don't know if there's somebody you already have that connection with, or if, you know, that you've been in their class and are interested in their research or something like that would be some tips from
all great pieces of advice. Absolutely. We have time for one more question, I think, if everybody's okay. We're a little bit after the hour, but I talked for a little bit long and the questions are important to me. Does anybody have any other like big question right now? It's like on their soul.
I had one question about blind applying. So we're talking about the idea of like blind applying in some of the previous ones, and then hearing you talk about it further, I was wondering if like with your recommendation for that, if you'd like which type of school you'd recommend like blind applying to, like would I blind apply to a school that maybe I'm not quite as interested in comparison to like my top choice? So then like when I do have my score back and then just press submit and it goes like everywhere, like I have better odds if I do like my score? Or
so ultimately, no matter what you do, they're going to see both scores. How they evaluate that is up to them individually as schools. I would say you should apply to the school of your dreams. Just get yourself out there. Put yourself out there and be like, that's the one I want to go to. That is 100% the place I want to be. That should be the blind submission one. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get your application done so that all we're waiting on is that beautiful score, and then the rest of the schools will fall into place. So a lot of students will, you know, if you're an Idaho resident and you're applying to the University of Washington, a lot of students will use that one as their blind submission. Other students, one of my students used their blind submission as their primary DO school that they knew they wanted to go to, and their primary MD school. For PA students, for dental students, your score comes the day you take the test. So, I mean, ultimately, you really can, you'll know exactly where you sit that day. So it's almost like it's going to arrive the same time as the scores. But for allopathic and osteopathic medical schools, you're going to want to consider a blind submission option, and you're going to want to use your practice exams as your test, you know, of, okay, I'm not so scared to do this because I'm getting this kind of score. But yes, so I would choose the school of your dreams. Absolutely. Because they're going to see both scores if you end up taking it twice anyway. And you can't win the lottery unless you play. All right. There are a ton of exciting things happening, and we've tried to make them very useful for you. I tried to make them user-friendly in a sense that I tried to put them in the order that you were going to need them the most. So the first up, personal statement workshop. Can't come, request a recording. Please, please. If you come, it's hugely valuable. It's at 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. via Zoom or in person in the Norco building. You should have gotten an email from me today that said that this was on. This is great. This provides you with a PowerPoint, student perspective, all of those things. The other one is super exciting. So instead of doing a professional graduate school workshop in February, we are deferring to this College of Health Science. They have brought in a guest speaker from Harvard. His name is Dr. Paul Farmer. If you've ever watched a Netflix documentary called Bending the Arc, he is the main medical anthropologist and physician in that video. He's done a lot of global work, international work. He will be coming to our campus. We will have an undergraduate and a graduate level conversation with him where you'll get to meet and greet him. And then the actual thing happens on Wednesday, February 23rd at 6 o'clock. The doors open at 5. It is free. It'll be in the Morrison Center as long as, you know, all the world is fine. It'll be in the Morrison Center. This is free to the public. So I will put the link to both the personal statement in the chat and the Dr. Farmer link. So the personal statement. So the Zoom session registration, again, we ask you to fill out the Zoom registration and you get the option of putting in need a recording, any of those things. That is here. So that's that one. And then the second one is Dr. Farmer. You're craving an interaction with a physician or a medical practitioner of any kind. This is your chance. This is really cool. Very exciting and a great opportunity. Following that, we will be doing another cohort meeting at the end of February. This cohort meeting will be going over taking all of those things you did on the wayfinding map and starting to write them, starting to get feedback from your fellow classmates about how that sounds. Is it reflective enough? What can you do with that? And really starting to get those pieces in place. March is when we are going to do the letter of recommendation workshop. I'm going to go through and talk to you about how to ask, tips and tricks, when to ask, and there's a reason it's in March, because you really shouldn't be asking faculty until March. You can't give them anything until May in most cases for most of your programs. Don't ask them unless it is like dire straits. You feel like you have to do that. Come to this cohort meeting. We will be doing an interview and preparation workshop in early March. Those of you who have to take the Casper, this could be a really good tool for you to prepare. It's never too early. The mock MMI will likely be via Zoom, and it's great because then I can bring in more observers. I can bring in more student observers who maybe aren't ready to interview. I can get some interviewees. It's a fun time. Some of you have attended. I know I've seen a couple of you in there. Some of you have been interviewed. Some of you have watched. We will do our essential application workshop, basically giving you the skinny on what it's going to look like when it opens, whichever application you're applying on April 18th. We're doing this later than we did it last year because many of the application cycles aren't going to give me information about their new application until around that time. And I want you to have the most up-to-date information so we don't have any surprises. And then my favorite is the end of year panels. I'm so excited. We will have a pre-med panel and a pre-dental panel and a pre-health panel, which will be a PA, PT, OT, and an optometry. We've had a great year so far. We have students already accepted to dental school. We have students already accepted to med school, and I have students already accepted to PT school. So it's going to be awesome. It's a great opportunity to ask students exactly what it felt like to apply. and to get that lowdown. And then lastly, if you are interested in the mentorship program, we would ask that you respond to that email. We're trying to get that off and running. Shannon Kerr is going to run that program. So these things are all happening this spring alongside any programs I bring. I will be bringing Utah back from the medical school, PA school for ISU, OT school for ISU, dietetics. I'll be bringing vet schools back. I'll be bringing University of Washington Medical School usually comes, they bring their students, and we usually do something in March. So lots of great, exciting things for you to participate in or get watch recordings on if we have to. Any questions on that? Have a plan. All right, I will stay in the room. That's all I have for you tonight. I hope it was beneficial.